Hello everybody, welcome back on Sledarna stage. We know that competition right now is very hard, but Josef will be the best presenter you definitely seen today, maybe tomorrow and next few months also. I'm very proud that I can invite to stage Josef Tetek, who is for a long time with the parallel community as a member of Parallelní Polis Club. He very early found out about the Bitcoin, and but from 2015 he said he is very much involved. He works as a developer for or cooperate with Top Monks, and also he's working on the project of Dbank. And right now he's ready for his presentation about Bitcoin. Also, I have to say that he's one who is helping us with the Bitcoin meetups in Parallelní Polis, so I'm very thankful to him for this. So, Josef, floor is yours.
Thank you. So, thanks for the introduction. So we are going to have some fun analyzing Bitcoin security budget. So who here has heard about the term security budget in relation to Bitcoin? Okay, just a couple of guys, that's good, because you're actually going to learn something new. All right, so when I was going through the presentation with my wife, which I highly recommend because wives are like good, honest critiques of your work, she said you know, I don't really get it, what you're saying, because it's this crazy Bitcoin stuff, but maybe at the beginning you should say why are you talking about it? So the motivation for the talk is that this idea that Bitcoin is like a low transaction fee payment system, this needs to be destroyed. And the comparison, for example, to Visa on a transaction per second basis is really stupid, because Bitcoin was never meant to be that, and Bitcoin was never designed that way. We can have other comparisons with Visa, but on a volume basis, not on a transaction count. And the basic inspiration for the talk are the works of great Bitcoin analysts Dan Held, Nick Carter, Paul Storz, and Hasu. And my talk is actually like a synthesis of their talks and trying to move their ideas a little bit further and derive something new. So what is actually security budget? Security budget is like the sum of payments that we pay for Bitcoin miners in order to secure the immutability and irreversibility of our transactions. Security budget is also called mining rewards, and mining rewards consist of block subsidies and transaction fees. And as I've been learning about Bitcoin over the years, it's sometimes called going down the rabbit hole of learning about Bitcoin. I found that at the bottom of the rabbit hole is actually the security budget. Because if you start thinking about Bitcoin on the economics of Bitcoin, you find out it all revolves around this measure, around security budget. So if we are going to make some forward-looking statements about Bitcoin, I think we should start with analyzing security budget. And there are three basic questions when it comes to security budget. How can we actually know that we are not underpaying miners, that we are not overpaying miners? Or if we know this question for now and for the past, how can we know that we won't do so in the future? Yeah, and you can approach this problem from two lines of thinking. You can either try to derive something like an adequate security budget from the market cap, as some analysts have tried to do, but that's not really telling us much, because market cap itself is like a really meaningless measure. If you take a look, for example, at UTXOH, you can see that about 4 million Bitcoins haven't moved in more than 5 years. So actually the market cap may be overstated by more than 20%, because we don't know if these UTXOs are actually spendable. A lot of those Bitcoins are lost, and market cap just doesn't tell us anything. It's just this stock measure. We need to go for the flow measure, because security budget is actually highly relevant to what goes on now on a daily basis, not just some big total aggregate. So the second line of thinking how we can derive the security budget is by looking at the on-chain transfers, what gets transacted on-chain, for example, on a daily basis, and we are going to analyze that. All right, so let's answer the first question. That's quite easy. How can we know that we don't underpay miners? Well, first of all, Bitcoin is here for 10 years, and as far as we know, we haven't seen a real double spend 51% attack that would try to inject the alternate history so that somebody would be scammed on the blockchain level. Of course, we had some double spend with the zero confirmation transactions. That's actually what Charlie Hill is doing here on Hackers Congress with his app and with his workshops. But we never saw a double spend attack on the blockchain itself when some previously mined blocks would be reorged. And we have a nice case study that CZ from Binance provided us this year, because in May 2019, Binance was hacked and about 7,000 Bitcoins were stolen. That was worth about $40 million back then. And he got this crazy idea. It wasn't actually his idea at first. I think it was from Jeremy Rubin. He got this idea that he could try to reorg the chain and either get those coins back or just distribute them among the miners so that he would hurt the hacker. Fortunately, he discussed that with his good friend, good old Jihan Wu and others, and he understood that the idea is stupid and it would be hugely costly to do that. All right, so we can be quite sure that we don't underpay miners compared to some altcoins which were actually attacked with the 51% attack. So how can we know that we don't underpay miners? And interesting fact is that Nick Carter, who did some great analysis of security budget. I highly recommend this article. It's the Settlement Assurance is Stupid. It's his title. So Nick says, this is actually my view. Due to this fixed block subsidies and high notional amount of single Bitcoin units, we are probably highly overpaying miners. And I will try to critique this idea, because I don't think this is so. But let's say Nick's idea, it makes kind of sense at the first glance, because it's true. We have fixed block subsidies. First, we had 50 Bitcoins per block, 25 Bitcoins, 12.5. That's where we are now. And every 4 years, this gets halved, right? So yeah, we can say miners get 12.5 Bitcoins now. It's true. But as Hasu, other great analytical mind, says, the token itself, Bitcoin, doesn't have any intrinsic value. It doesn't have any value by itself. The only value is there on the social layer, which is just a fancy term for the market. So the market decides what is the worth of the Bitcoin that miners get. So of course, 12.5 Bitcoin in 2016, after the halving, is not the same purchasing power as to 12.5 Bitcoins now. And we can see that on the next chart. This is how much the miners earn on a daily basis as a daily median in USD, all through the history. And it's on a log scale, right? So that it's actually readable. I have put the floor at $10,000 because before 2011, they didn't really receive much. It's the total mining rewards, total security budget. So that means it's both the block subsidies and the transaction fees. But the transaction fees actually make up like 2 or 3% of the mining rewards. So it's mostly just block subsidies. And you can see in 2016, after the halving, which was like in Q2, miners got like $2 million daily. And now they still make 12.5 Bitcoin per block, but, oh, sorry, here, they get $20 million. So the same block subsidy translates to hugely different like purchasing power. And you can actually see that even before the halving, miners got like 25 Bitcoins per block, let's say, but it was worth much less. So it doesn't actually matter how much Bitcoins they get. What matters is like the purchasing power. You don't have to measure it actually in dollars. You can measure it in like cheeseburgers or whatever. But the fact is that Bitcoin doesn't exist there as in some vacuum. It's like measured in real world stuff, whether it's dollars or Czech crowns or beers or whatever. All right, so this chart tells us how much does Bitcoin actually transfer on a daily basis in dollar terms. It's a median, which I think is a much better measure than averages. And we can see the dynamic is quite similar to the mining rewards, right? So right now, Bitcoin's blockchain on-chain transfers around $2 billion daily. And you can see that I have two curves here. I have data from blockchain.info and Coinmetrics, and they are a little bit similar. Actually, the difference is a multiple of 2. Blockchain.info tells us that that Bitcoin transfers $1 billion daily, while Coinmetrics tells us it's $2 billion daily. So, as a side note on like Bitcoin data, and this is quite interesting because there are two things we don't actually accurately know about what goes on in Bitcoin. The first one is, as the world has seen recently, like 2 weeks ago, we don't actually know what the hash rate is. Right? Some analysts thought that the hash rate dropped 40% one day because that's what the data showed us. There was a drop of 40% on one day in the hash rate. But the thing is, we cannot accurately measure the short-term hash rate because it's measured just, it's derived actually from the time difference between each mined blocks. So to the surprise of many, this hash rate went back up the next day. So there actually wasn't any drop in hash rate. It was just a deviation in how the data is derived. And the same thing applies also to net on-chain transfers. And this might seem kind of strange because we can see on the blockchain how much Bitcoins get transacted. But the raw transactions themselves don't tell us like what the economically significant transfers are because there are a lot of change outputs and there are a lot of like, it's called short-term hops where a transaction is spent, for example, after one confirmation, which usually happens if somebody does like a lot of transactions from his own wallet and he just mixes it. So that's actually what that's actually how both blockchain.info and Coinmetrics try to derive like the daily net transfers by actually taking out the change outputs or what they think are change outputs, because we are not actually sure what the change outputs are, and by taking out like these short-term hops, right? So we don't actually know how much gets transferred on-chain in the short term, but in the long term, we can see that it has some trend, right? The same stuff as with hash rate. It's a bad measure for the short term, but a good measure for the long term, this like derivation. All right, and in the next slide, I'm actually using the coin metrics data because from the perspective of security budget, it's actually more conservative, right? All right, so this is like my attempt to derive something like an adequate security budget. I measure here the ratio of mining rewards to the daily transfers. So that means what kind of percentage do miners earn when compared to how much gets transferred on a daily basis in the long term, both in like medians, right? It's not averages, we just measure the medians. And it's kind of interesting. We see that after like the first years, it dropped heavily, and then it gets kind of flat. And actually, if we measure like the correlation between mining rewards and the daily transfers, the correlation is quite big. It's like 0.97 for the 10-year period. For the 5-year period, it's like 0.95. So there's quite a big correlation here. All right, this is a zoom of the same metric, rewards to transfers, but just for 5 years. And why to the recent 5 years? Because there are 3 points why I think this is like significant and relevant. First of all, in the past 5 years, like all the metrics have just blown up. Like the price, the volumes, and the adoption, it's just like 100 times larger compared to like 2015. The second point is we have like a professional, like the mining industry got much more professional. In 2016, I think it was Q1 or Q2, Antminer S9 was introduced, and this was a 17 nanometer miner. And for like next, I think 3 or 4 years, no, sorry, it couldn't be 4 years. It was for 3 years. This was the peak of the possible architecture. So that there was no longer like this race of the miners to get the newest ASIC miner and just to mine as much as possible in as short term as possible. And that's why in the first years you got this concentration of hash rate in China because they were the closest to the factories. But that doesn't actually happen anymore after we reached like the peak efficiency with 17 nanometer Antminers. There were like 7 nanometer Antminers introduced, I think in December 2018. But you can see it doesn't actually change the economics that much anymore, right? Because the mining industry is much more professional and much more competitive. So what now matters is like the long-term efficiency of the miners when it comes to like operational expenditure. All right, and what you also, like the third points, what you got in these 5 years is you get the halving here. And you can see after the halving, like the ratio of the rewards to the transfers kind of dropped, but then it got up and it was actually even higher than before the halving after some time. So you can see, I think you can start seeing like the emerging pattern of the underlying Bitcoin economics when it comes to security budget in these 5 years. And like the average of this ratio over the 5-year period is 0.8%, and the median is 0.7%. And I think this is quite a beautiful number, especially the median, because when we compare it with something, it's kind of mind-blowing, and I'm going to get there in a few seconds. So let us just help ourselves right now with two quotes from Dan Held and Nick Carter. So Dan Held points out that the security budget is relevant only actually as a protection to the 51% attack, which happens at the tip of the blockchain, right? Only like for the recent blocks is that relevant. Because even for the altcoins that were 51% attacked, there was no like complete chain rewrite. It was just like last couple of hundred blocks so that the attacker could scam the exchange. And what Nick says has something to do with like this professionalization of the mining industry. Because at the time of winning a block, the miner has probably burned resources roughly equivalent to the value of the block with just a small margin, because the industry is much more competitive and much more professional, and there's no longer this race to get the latest ASIC anymore. So the miner has to be incentivized to actually play nice, create valid and rule-following blocks, and not try to reorg the tip of the blockchain, like Dan Held says. All right, so having this in mind, why is actually this number significant? Like the average of the 5-year period, 0.10%, and the median, 0.7%. Just for the reminder, this is like the ratio of the mining rewards compared with like daily transfers, what get transferred daily on Bitcoin blockchain. So when we take a look at daily blocks, there are 144 blocks per day. And one block out of these 144% of 144 is the division gets us a result of 0.7%, which is the same. Seems nice, but maybe that's just like random. But I don't think it's actually random, because how much value, how worth would we expect this one block to be? We would expect it, like a typical block, to be worth like 0.7% of the daily transfers, right? If you have like this equal distribution of the value between the blocks daily, you would have this, you would expect that the block is worth this much. Like if $144 million were transferred daily, then one block would be worth $1 million, right? So now, how is that relevant compared to like mining rewards? We need miners to actually produce valid rule-following blocks that are not attacking the network. So it means we have to incentivize the miners to accept the reward and not accept like the reorg yield, right? And the reorg yield or reorg reward would be worth that much, because if we go for a reward, the maximum reward that the miner could get is how much the single block is worth, which on the long term is this number, 0.7%, like the $1 million, for example. So in order for the miners to play it nice, we need them to have at least, on a long-term basis, the same amount as they would get if they were trying to reorg the blocks. So I think this is like kind of nice, kind of mind-blowing, that we see that the economics of Bitcoin, of the mining rewards, like gets in disharmony, right, with what you would expect. All right, so this is like the theory, or the trying to explain the observed correlation in a nutshell, right? So miner has to be incentivized to not attack the blockchain, to act nicely. What does it mean to be incentivized? It means that the mining reward has to be adequate. It doesn't tell us that much. What's adequate? Adequate means it should be worth like waiting for the Coinbase maturity to get the reward, which means that the mining reward should be higher or the same as the reorg reward, right? And we can see that this 0.7% of daily transfers seems to be the rough rule of thumb for like the adequate security budget. But we can see that actually in the history it was sometimes less than the 0.7%, and I think this is due to like other factors, because there is no pool with 51% hash rate actually, so it's really hard to coordinate, as CZ found out. The miners have like huge capex that they need to amortize and like pay off in the long term. So they have to like play the long-term play, not just go for like the individual mining rewards, but to like try to go for the long-term mining rewards. But if it would like break down completely and miners would get like 0.001%, as happened actually for the altcoins, it would pay off not to play nice, but to actually reorg. So if we like accept that this is at least kind of true, at least on the good way to get it through security budget, how can we know that we won't overpay or underpay miners in the future? And Satoshi like presumed or anticipated these kinds of debates when in 2010 he said like in 2 decades there will either be like a huge volume of transactions and the fees of course, or there will be none. So we need like big fees in the future, right? So let's see like where are we right now. Like the transaction fees, they are nowhere like high enough. It was looking kind of good in here, 2017. Everybody was pissed off that they have to pay like high transaction fees. But then after SegWit, it kind of broke down. And right now, the transaction fees make up only like 2% of the total security budget. So that's not a lot, right? And in 10 years, like that's basically the horizon that Satoshi talks about, like after 20 years, since 2010, they are going to be about 97% of all Bitcoins mined. So to keep the security budget adequate so that it actually secures what gets transferred on chain, we need either of 2 things. We either need like higher transaction fees, like much higher, so that they make up like, for example, 50% of the security budget, or we need like a massive rise in price. So you can see, you can ask like how massive. I'm glad somebody asked that. So I have actually made some scenarios, and I have 3 scenarios here. Right now we see like daily transfers about $2 billion daily, right? If we reached like Visa volumes, Visa transfers about $20 billion daily. So this is the second scenario. And the third one is $200 billion, which seems crazy, but it's only 10% of Fedwire. And Fedwire is something like SWIFT, but for just American banks. It's a settlement system for settling like transactions among in the American banking system. And they do actually $2 trillion daily. So if we just reach 10% of that, it will be $200 billion. All right, so what are the other variables? We get this adequate mining reward of 0.7% of the daily transfers, right? Daily transactions, I keep this stable, 300,000 transactions, which is actually what the count of transactions today. So I don't presume here any like efficiency increasements in that. And block subsidy per day in 2028, it's after 2 halvings, it's going to be 225 Bitcoins daily, right? So if transaction fees make up only 5% of the reward, similar to what they are now, quite slightly higher, we would need Bitcoin price to be around $60,000 and fees would be $2 in the first scenario. And of course, if we need to secure more for the daily transfers, of course, either the price or the fee needs to be higher, or actually both of them, right? So this is the most crazy, and I'm not saying it's going to happen, it'll be very crazy. If only 5%, if there was only like 5% transaction fee, making up the security budget, we would need like a Bitcoin price of $6 million if this much was transferred daily. All right, so what about like if transaction fees actually take over and we have like 75% of the reward in transaction fees? then there is like a much less need for high Bitcoin price. And of course, the fees would be like this. So at minimum, it would be like $35. And the Bitcoin price wouldn't actually rise that much. All right, so it's quite fun making these Excel predictions. And how could we achieve like higher transaction fees? I've got some proposals here. And since it was full of numbers and charts, I made them in like a meme form. So somebody said like we should reduce the block size. I think it's kind of nice idea. So responsible Bitcoiners maybe could think about that, like smaller block sizes, because then it would feel like much easier, and you wouldn't have like this one set per byte transactions. But for everybody else, this seems like a pretty crazy idea. And Luke, who proposes this, is actually called crazy for that. So, like the other one is. This is quite easy. We could make a new metric to measure in history how long it takes for one set transactions to actually get confirmed. And I use one set transactions all the time. I actually use it here at the conference because that's what the green address proposes as like the smallest fee that should actually get confirmed. And it gets confirmed within a few hours. So in the future, it shouldn't be possible to like get one set transactions confirmed, at least not within a few hours. Because if that keeps on happening, it means the mempool is not filled that much, and the miners actually don't get any reward from that. All right, the third one is like a little bit complicated, so I've split it into two memes. So right now, one of the problems is you don't actually know like how soon the transaction is going to be confirmed. You either underpay, and what can happen is that your transaction is stuck in the mempool for like a week or 2 weeks, or you overpay, and for this single transaction, you pay just too much for the transaction, right? So this could be mitigated if we actually did something like block space futures, where you will just auction like your place for the transaction like a week from now. So it will be like a block space futures, right? Everybody's talking about like BACT and CME and CBOE, about these Bitcoin futures. I think that's highly irrelevant when it comes to like long-term Bitcoin economics. What's more relevant is security budget and just filling this mempool, and like block space futures could be like a nice idea for that, and like blackjack and hookers is optional. All right, so I hope I gave you something to think about. I'd like to hear feedback. Maybe I'm totally off the rails here, but I think it's kind of interesting to see this correlation and just try to explain it. So if you want to just read some of my analysis, you can follow me like at CryptoJoseph on Twitter or HackerNoon. I'm actually going to write this down after I hear the feedback, if it's like not that you're totally dumb and this doesn't make sense. Yeah, so check me out. Check out TopMonks. We are a software development company who do like publishing and analysis and all kind of stuff. We also do like tech angel investments. And check out DBank. This is like a Bitcoin startup focused on like something like we called peer banking, and we are going to have talks tomorrow in the evening at the Institute. So thank you. I'm looking forward to the questions.
Okay, thank you, Josef. So, any hand raised for a question? I see there in the back.
Yeah.
Hi, thanks for this presentation. You said that what you think is the incentive for the miners not to 51% attack the network is that they're making more money by just mining. I'm not agree with that Because I'm thinking that they are not attacking the network because the effect of the attack would just simply kill the network. Can you just comment on that?
Yeah, that's true. That's like the other measures for securing the network that they have to actually pay off the capex over long term. But like if you take a look at altcoins that were 51% attacked, the miners didn't care that much about killing the network. Because if there is like a huge discrepancy between like what the miners get if they act nicely and what they can get by scamming the exchange, we should expect them to go for that, and we should not rely on them like just playing it nice. I'm not sure that this ratio of 0.7% is that number that we are looking for, but there has to be some relation of how much gets transferred and by what kind of security budget is it secured by. Like if you would transfer $10 billion over Bitcoin today, you wouldn't want to like wait for just 6 confirmations. You would need to wait for, oh, sorry. You would have to wait for, I don't know, like half a year because there will be this discrepancy. Or actually, the party receiving the $10 billion in Bitcoin would have to wait for like half a year, I think, because otherwise, for the sending party, it would be tempting to try to like organize the miners, bribe them, and just try to reorg. So there has to be like some relation of how much miners get and how much gets transferred on chain. I think it's quite clear because otherwise there wouldn't have to be any security budget, right? And we would just rely on miners to just act nicely by whatever they get.
Good. Okay, we have 2 more questions I see. First here on the left.
Thanks. Yeah, I agree that there must be such it can't be too low. I mean, there must be something that the miners earn. But I really didn't understand how you get to the 0.7% because it seems to me like you just divide it by an arbitrary 144 blocks because that's the day. But where's that day come from? So it might be a month. Why not?
Yeah, it could be. It's well, yeah, I can try to calculate it on a monthly basis, but I think the ratio should be the same because if I calculate, you know, the mining reward and the daily transfers will be on a monthly basis, let's say. So, like, we can see that over long term, this ratio stays the same.
Yeah, if you the first way you calculate it is where you actually calculate how much do they earn, and did I understand that right? That this includes the
fees,
the fees and the how's it called, the other thing?
The subsidy.
The subsidies too, yeah. But that's fine. But then you said, okay, it must be this way because it's 1 block in 144, and that I didn't get the logic there.
That's like, that's like the weakest point of my talk, I guess.
Okay, right.
It's just I don't know. Yeah, I find it kind of interesting. We find this like correlation, which is quite big, and we see that it flattened over the 5 years when like the price boom and bust happened, halving happened, and we had like new miners coming. So I don't know like how else I would explain it because as like Held and Carter says, you have to protect against like the reorgs like for like recent blocks. And I think 1 day is like a good measure of like recent time, let's say.
All right. Okay.
Well, I'm good. I'm going to try to recalculate it for like monthly basis and see what comes out.
Okay, here is the next one.
Thanks for the presentation. I really like it. My question is this. I think it's clear we cannot scale on chain for every single transaction. I think the second layer it's a fact. But do you think that with the current block space, we will have enough space to open all the channels that we need for daily basis?
I think if we introduced like auctioning of future block space, we could actually like increase the probability that everybody gets to open whenever they like, because it wouldn't be this race to just be in the next blocks. Because if you are not in like next couple of blocks, you can wait for like a week or two if the fees are high. So it would be like a nice like assurance that I don't have to like partake in this race. I will just buy my block space like 2 weeks from now for some like reasonable price, and after that I will have my channel open. So I think this is going to come as a part of like maturing of the system, that like we kind of give up on this idea that the transactions have to be included in like the next block. This is like other narrative that has been quite wrong with Bitcoin, that it takes just 10 minutes to send a transaction. It should be completely custom how long the transaction takes. It could take like 10 minutes if you are a trader that's doing some arbitrage, or it could take like maybe you should be able to buy the block space like 2 weeks from now, which would be nice, for example, for settling on-chain futures or something like that, when you need to be sure when it gets settled.
Excuse me, do you see that coming soon, the block space futures? So are the miners going to allocate some resources just for committing that?
Yeah, I tried thinking about how this could come about, and I guess miners would have to, might be kind of dangerous, because they would have to like give some kind of pledge that what gets auctioned gets actually included, right? Because and I don't know how does that happen. Maybe with some like multi-sig transaction or something, because we don't know who is going to be the single miner who mines that. So I would like just like something that is kind of interesting. Maybe I've seen it somewhere before. I don't know if it's my idea, but I would like to talk about that with some miners or somebody who's in like futures, how this could come about if you don't know who's actually going to be the party who delivers that. That would be interesting, right?
Okay, is there anybody with maybe last question? If no, I will thank to Josef. If you don't have anything, what you'd like to add?
No, just feel free to talk to me after the presentation. I'd like to hear any type of feedback.
Okay, so Josef will be definitely around, so catch him on maybe later. And here we will continue with the Nick Middleton live stream, and definitely we invite you after his talk. There will be the auction of the gold coin, so definitely of Julian Assange. So everybody join us. So one more time, I've asked you for applause for Josef for his presentation. Thank you.